purpose of this program is not to mourn those who gave their lives, but it is to remember and recognize the tremendous efforts and ultimate sacrifice of first responders who gave their all.
There's a day in history that all generations remember. For some, it was the dropping of the nuclear bomb. For others, it was the assassination of JFK. For my generation, it was 9/11. What we do in law enforcement and all of our first responders, what we see normally is the aftermath, the thank yous, the coming together of people after the fact, thanking us for our service. The truth of it is we don't need to wait for the tragedy. We don't need to wait for the tragedy to come together to support the law enforcement officials, the fire officials, the EMS officials, because it's not what they do. It's not what they do at all. It's what they're prepared to do. That's what we're thanking them for. That's what we need to always remember when we have the opportunity 5 years from now when nothing's going on. Have the opportunity to go up to those individuals that you see at a restaurant and thank them for their service. Because again, it's not what they do for you that day, it's what they're prepared to do for you the next day.
This morning is a morning for us to reflect on the lives of all the first responders and their families that were impacted by the moments of 9/11, and all the first responders that answer the call here on out. Whether you're volunteer or paid, professional, or you're new to the entire organization, we absolutely stand behind one another, and we're here for you, the public, and each other as brothers.
So I joined the EMS team and their colleagues in thanking those who are the heroes, remembering the heroes who lost their lives, the families, and remembering first responders who each and every day, 24/7, every day of the year, put their lives on the line and make sacrifices. We share time away from their families to put patients and individuals injured or hurt or sick or ill first.
You might wonder, why would we include the military in a first responder program? Well, I guess you could say we're the ones that respond all over the world. Myself personally, I spent over 20 years, 6 months, and 1 day in the military police. And we have our installations all over the world, and that's our first responders. We have our police, we have our firemen, we have our ambulances, and it doesn't matter what service we're in. We're all here to serve this great country.
And as most of you know, I'm a student of history, and obviously history always tells us, never forget the past. It's a day that we will never forget some 16 years ago when our nation suffered one of the most horrific attacks on U.S. soil. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost, the youngest of them just 3 years old. Today, we here in Jefferson Parish stand together as a community and never forget those families and service members affected by the attacks of September 11th. To Mr. Hank Burshak, to the West Jeff Civic Coalition, veterans, first responders, and to the people of Jefferson Parish, I thank all of you for having me here and wanted to share why this day is important to me. When the attacks happened, I was in my mid-20s, just starting my governmental career. I saw the devastation like all of you, and I knew that I had to do something. I knew that I couldn't sit back and helplessly watch. Part of the reason I joined the United States Navy Reserve was because of my concern about what was happening to this country in the war on terror. I knew I wasn't going to sit back and simply do nothing. Since 2009, I have had the privilege of serving this great country alongside the brave men and women who defend us from tyranny, terror, and oppression every day. So I say thanks to all of the first responders, our military, and our religious members for keeping us all safe through training, responsiveness, and most importantly, prayer. 16 years may seem like a long time, and as the saying goes, time heals all wounds. For those families and Americans who were affected by 9/11, this may not always be the case. I'm mindful enough to know that my words can't fill the absence of a loved one. However, when we are all together to do something to never forget, our actions can help mend the pain left behind by those attacks. If you have ever been to the 9/11 Memorial, I encourage you to go. The elevator ride on One World Trade Center is basically a 3D, three-walled film projection that takes you from bedrock New York all the way to present time. And the most moving time is as you go up that elevator in the 1970s when the World Trade Center comes up on the screen and in 2001 simply disappears. The good news is 9/11 and that memorial has been a reflection and a place for remembrance. It's one of the most touching museums you could ever visit. Things are rebounding there. The sphere that was placed in the original plaza at One World Trade, between One World Trade and Two World Trade, has now been has been moved back from Battery Park from New York. One story that should bring us all hope is the story of the Callery pear tree. This tree once stood in the original plaza at between One World Trade and Two World Trade. Amidst the wreckage of Ground Zero, this survivor tree it was removed from the damage and lived through this dark attack. After its rescue, it was nursed back by the New York Parks Department. In the years following 9/11, the tree has flourished, growing back its branches and leaves. Today, it stands as a statement of its power of the renewal and resilience, just like this country, and frankly, just like the region we live in. I'll close with this. In 1965, after the bombing of a church in Selma, Alabama, President Lyndon Johnson said to Congress, "At times, history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in a man's unending search for freedom." For me personally, that time was 9/11. Please pray for the millions of Americans still in harm's way by the wrath of Hurricane Irma and what's left to come this hurricane season. Thank you all for having me here. God bless each of you, this parish, and one of the greatest nations we could ever choose to live in. Thank you.
Some of y'all might wonder why we are gathered here today at this location. Well, if you read the marker here sitting to my right, in 10 years after 9/11, this was put here in remembrance of 9/11 by Oakwood Shopping Center. And we host this each and every year now in remembering 9/11 right at this location because of that. And if you look up in the sky, there's a special flag, honor and remember, being flown today too. Please remember that, because we're here to honor and remember 9/11 and the men and women that made the ultimate sacrifice in protecting. You know, Sheriff LaPinto mentioned remembering where you were, and each American at that time remembers where their location was, and no different from myself. I was sitting here at a breakfast meeting at the West Bank AROC and watching this unfold right before our very eyes, and in awe and shock that our country was under attack and a terrorist attack. So each and every one of us here remember that day and that morning like it was yesterday. You know, most importantly, as our first responders, and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to our police, thank you to our EMS, thank you to our firemen, and thank you to the men and women that each and every day put the uniform on to protect our country, for a place we call home. Because without them, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, freedom isn't free. And they protect us each and every day. And I want to say personally thank you to all of our first responders and our military for making our home, America, a great country to live in. Thank you very much.
Well, we want to acknowledge through silence the striking of the first plane on that day. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.